Chapter 281. Timar's First Tomb 2. There is an area called Valai in the Great Plains of Ans, in the central zone of the plains. Go there and infuse the shadow energy into this key. Then his first tomb will be revealed to you. Is there anything I should keep in mind? No matter what happens there, do not panic. This is what Sodaret wanted me to tell you. Is there anything else? Nothing. I wish you luck in your battles. Jean Runcandle. The key that Pecan handed over while uttering those words was a small black rod the size of a finger. It didn't look special at all. If one weren't aware that it was actually a key, they would easily mistake it for a missing piece of a device or something of the sort. He told you to infuse your shadow energy into it? Give it to me. Murakan took the key and started infusing shadow energy into it. Nothing happened. At least it seemed so. I can see what this object is about. These objects won't activate unless a sufficient amount of shadow energy is infused into them. Sodaret used to make these things and call them toys. Really? So, when are you going to head to the Great Plains of Ans? Murakan asked. I'd like to go immediately, but first I have to see Uncle Jed and also get the dates for the assassination of the Black Knight spy, since my mother said that would be my first mission. She said she would assign another flag-bearer who is an expert in that, alongside you. I suppose it will be Joshua, right? Since it's a crucial mission, he'll try to use you while giving all the credit to Joshua. I don't think Mother would use such superficial tricks. What do you think, Gilly? I agree with you, young master. I don't think it would be Joshua, that cunning bastard. Oops, sorry. Instead, I believe it would be young Lady Luncia or young Master Dyphus. Luncia and Dyphus. These two were always mentioned when people discussed the strongest flag-bearer of Runcandle besides Luna, who was above the rest. Luncia and Dyphus, huh? Well, that's true. Since we have to eliminate a Black Knight, we'll need someone with a proven track record as well. But if they're certain this Black Knight is a spy, why not simply capture and kill him? Why go through the trouble of planning a mission and all that? They could easily execute him as a target for elimination in the Garden of Swords, couldn't they? We need enough justification and a backstory to kill someone as prominent as a Black Knight. We can't reveal to all clan members that the Black Knight had been a spy, so a simple elimination would undermine discipline within the clan while revealing the truth. Holding a trial for espionage would undermine the clan's reputation, as this particular spy happens to be a Black Knight. Goodness, you humans. You barely live a century, and yet you hold your reputation in higher esteem than us dragons. So, we can't go to Timar's tomb before you're assigned a date for the assassination of the Black Knight, right? That's right. Things are going to get slow around here. TSK. They'll probably give plenty of time to prepare for the mission. Killing a Black Knight spy is not a simple assassination, and the clan will also need to prepare well in advance. Once we know the date, let's head to Timar's tomb before the mission begins. Jean went to see Jed the next day. He no longer taught the intermediate class cadets. He was now an instructor for the advanced class cadets. I sent the entire group of advanced level cadets on external missions so that I can pass on the final movements to you. His voice echoed strongly as he spoke in the center of the empty training field. Jed was still in the advanced stages of his 8-star level, but that was merely an indication of his aura. It didn't speak of the actual skill he could display in combat. There weren't many 9-star swordsmen who could defeat Jed in combat. Thank you, Uncle. There are 3 final movements that I can teach you without council approval. But one of them is suitable for chain swords, and another is suitable for giant swords. Therefore, I will teach you the final movement suitable for long swords. Yes, sir. Jean had witnessed and faced 2 finishing movements since his revival. The 3rd final movement, Meteor Shower, and the 7th final movement, Volcano. Both techniques were extremely powerful. In particular, the captivating scene that unfolded before his eyes when Luna executed Meteor Shower to kill Andre still inspired Jean from time to time. That's why he wanted to learn Meteor Shower first, but I guess that will have to wait until I can defeat all the elders. Jed slowly unsheathed his sword. The 4th final movement, Petal Cascade. I will demonstrate it slowly at first, so try to follow the flow of the sword and the aura. Jed's sword began to emanate light as it was bathed in aura. For now, it was no different from the energy of an ordinary sword. But soon, he could see the aura around the sword splitting. The concentrated aura started forming small fractures. It meant that the aura around the sword was weakening. An aura that wasn't concentrated around the sword could break off like debris at the slightest impact. So knights always had to maintain their aura concentrated around the sword during battle. The aura around Jed's sword continued to open around the fractures. It looked like it would detach from the sword at the slightest touch. As you know, such fractures in the aura would hinder its use. Any inexperienced swordsman wielding their swords in this state would drop their aura. Jed then took a slight step forward. The sword naturally rose in the air and then Jed brought down the sword with a very smooth but swift motion. It was like any ordinary vertical slash. The fragments of aura remained intact on Jed's sword after the slash. His aura didn't detach, not even as the sword cut through the air. It was as if someone was moving a sandcastle without it crumbling. First, you have to be able to wield the sword in a way that the hanging aura fragments remain intact on the sword. Whoosh! The hanging aura fragments were released. It was like petals being released into the air, just like the name of the movement, petal cascade. But each of these aura petals had devastating power. They could easily cut through steel and even the flesh and bones of 8-star martial artists or higher. Such petals splattered in the air in unpredictable trajectories. If a person had been standing amidst them, they would have been torn into unrecognizable pieces within seconds. Could you feel it well? Jed asked. Jean nodded. The technique, petal cascade, is more difficult to master than it seems. Not only do you need to refine the aura, but also master willpower and the spirit of the word. And, most importantly, maintaining the aura intact until the required moment is impossible without the blessed body of the run candles. If someone were to forcefully maintain the falling aura intact without the blessed body, even 10-star knights would end up in recoil. I'm sure I don't need to explain the aura movement. First, practice fracturing and maintaining the aura intact. Once you've done that, transform each aura fragment into concentrated blade waves. Jean calmly listened to Jed's continued explanation, but, in reality, he felt a strange déjà vu when Jed fractured his aura. I'm sure of it. Petal Cascade, the fourth final movement, is based on Cascade, the legendary sword combat technique. There were many similarities between Cascade, the legendary sword combat technique, and Petal Cascade, the final movement. Both required intentional aura fracturing, keeping it intact on the sword, and then releasing it at the desired moment to create waves on the blade. Of course, the original of the two had to be Cascade, the legendary sword combat technique. Jean could even tell which of these similar techniques was superior. Cascade is certainly superior, apart from the fact that humans without a light heart could never use it. Suddenly, he felt worried. What if most of the long-awaited final movements were nothing more than inferior copies of the legendary sword? At least Meteor Shower and Volcano are original to the run candles, so I guess that won't be the case. Jed's explanation continued for another 20 minutes. That's all. If you have any questions, now is the time. Uncle, what is it? I'm sure you know that I also wield lightning energy, in addition to being Soderet's contractor. Yes, it was widely talked about that you were Petal's contractor when you went by the name Bamel. Jean took off his shirt. He revealed the light heart in the center of his chest. Jed's eyes sparkled with intrigue. I had a fortuitous encounter in my days as a provisional flag-bearer. As a result, I gained this light heart and began wielding lightning energy. A fortuitous encounter, you say? I would like to tell you the whole story in detail if you swear to keep my secret, of course. What kind of fortuitous encounter would require such secrecy? I can definitely tell you that my story will also benefit you, Uncle. Now that you mention it, I'm intrigued. Very well. Jed. Run Candle. Swear on my honor that I will never speak of it to anyone. Now it was Jin's turn to explain to Jed the kind of training he had received from the legends in La Ferosa. Surprisingly, Jed listened with great interest, like a child listening to stories of days past. Jin told him everything, except for the fact that the 77 legends had been prepared by Soderet for Timar's and Jin's own good. So our ancestor also knew the semi-orcs that were said to have gone extinct. It seems like a secret story that hasn't been written in any of the clan's documents. So, are you saying that the technique called Cascade, which you learned from them, is similar to Petal Cascade? I'll show you. Buzz. Lightning energy enveloped Jin's body, and Jed couldn't hide his surprise. The lightning energy gathered in Sigmund, and everything unfolded exactly like Petal Cascade. The energy intentionally split and forcefully remained intact. Oh, look at that! Jed clenched his fists tightly and exclaimed as Sigmund fell to the ground. The lightning energy followed Sigmund's trajectory and flowed down like a cascade. Anyone could tell it was similar to a cascade of petals. Just like, you, uncle, I used the minimum amount of lightning energy. Of course you did. Even Petal Cascade would have destroyed the training field if it had a large amount of aura. But this technique you performed called Cascade, clearly it is something superior. Well, then I would have nothing to teach you. But that wasn't all. In fact, Jin's demonstration made Jed see the limitations of the Petal Cascade final movement. And fully understanding a limitation was no different from saying that one was given the possibility to further improve oneself. But in Jed's case, he soared even higher. Since I cannot reach the light heart on my own, I won't be able to mimic Cascade even if I start mastering Petal Cascade again with the inspiration I've gained today. However, I feel like I might be able to enhance the power of Petal Cascade on my own. What? You're talking about enhancing the technique? Uncle? Just by looking at Jin's Cascade, Jed knew he could go beyond mastering Petal Cascade and further enhance it. I like it, Jin. I'll consider it a great gift you've given me today. Once I finish enhancing it and gain the approval of those boneheaded council elders, the council won't have any reasons to deny it anymore. In that case, it will be your achievement, uncle, not mine. Enhancing a finishing move is a tremendous achievement, and it will earn you many elders who will respect your opinion of me. But that doesn't mean they'll take away all the reasons to reject me, right? Jed smiled at those words. No, the council won't be able to deny or reject you anymore. You see, this old uncle of yours is going to add your name to the enhanced Petal Cascade. Chapter 282, Timar's First Tomb, 3. On February 25, 1799, all the flag-bearers who had set out to cheer up the clans under Runcandle's control returned to the Garden of Swords. They had heard stories about Jean from sources outside the clan while visiting each of their designated areas. Hey brother, welcome back. Smack. Mary abruptly punched Dyphus in the back. Oh, you little lunatic. Mary, how many times do I have to tell you to stop greeting me like that? Did anything interesting happen on your journey? How could anything be more interesting than what you did here? I may have suggested it, but I made it clear. You deal with the aftermath. He was referring to Mary stealing Bradamanti and handing it over to Jean. Why? You were with Joshua a while ago. Did he tell you something? Surprisingly, no. But that's when it's most dangerous. You know that, right? Be careful for a while. I don't know anything about that. Besides, I've never watched my back in my whole life. But come on, stop talking about that. I asked if anything interesting happened during the journey. Dyphus brought his hand to his forehead. Yes, I'm the fool for expecting a normal conversation from you. So, was there or wasn't there? Yes, there was. On the 4th day of the journey, everyone was talking about Jean. Tell me. Damn it. Isn't it condescending of you to command me like that, 7th flag-bearer? Please tell me. Good Sir 4th flag-bearer. As expected, there were many clans that felt uncomfortable because Jean undermined the tradition and authenticity of the Runcandle clan. Is that so? There were some others who congratulated him, saying that thanks to him, the Saints are once again helping Huffister, although they were by far the minority. No, I'm not interested in any of that. You know what I'm asking you. Were there any rumors about Jin's strength? Of course. They were talking about comparing him to Dante Hyran. Apparently, some of the nobles from Huffister went to the Cosmos Arena where Jean had participated during his time as a provisional flag-bearer. They said the final battle was undoubtedly a spectacle. I mean that fighting competition where you ended up as the runner-up. Runner-up? I defeated that guy 2 months later, so I'm the champion. Look, there are ears listening, okay? Don't spill secrets like that around. Here. Anyway, Dante High ran. Huh? The world really has no idea. What are you talking about? I almost lost to him. Dyphus immediately stopped. You're joking, right? Does it seem like I'm joking? Sure, the successor of the Hyran Patriarchy is quite impressive, but he's nothing compared to Jean. I think you're underestimating Dante. Do you think it's possible for me to lose against Dante? Dyphus fell silent for a while. Certainly, Mary wouldn't have acted this way after fighting Dante. A power similar to Mary's at the age of 19? Jean is undoubtedly a beast. Obviously, Dyphus had expected Mary to defeat Jean. His original image was that Jean would be terribly injured in the process, leaving Dyphus alone with the mission to assassinate the Black Knight. At this rate, I'm just playing into my mother's hands. Damn it. The mission to assassinate the spy Black Knight Rosa had already decided to assign Dyphus with Jean. Soon, the stewards came to fetch the two flag-bearers. Madame Rosa has called for a flag-bearer meeting. All the flag-bearers immediately gathered in her office. We will discuss a single agenda item for this flag-bearer meeting. We also discussed it before the Patriarch left. It concerns the assassination of the Black Knight spy. Yes, Mother. Tension soared in the brief silence. This mission will be carried out by the 4th flag-bearer, Dyphus Runcandle, and the 12th flag-bearer, Jean Runcandle. Your mission is to provoke the death of the Black Knight in combat. The mission will take place in the disputed territory of Bentica, near the kingdom of Mila. The brothers felt different emotions when the 4th and 12th flag-bearers were assigned to the mission. Some felt relieved, while others felt like they had missed out on something. Dyphus immediately looked at Jean, but Jean deliberately avoided his gaze. A mining area where ancient Eversteel was supposed to be found was recently discovered in Bentica. We have received information that the Zippel are introducing the White Knight and the Kozek into the area for that purpose. Therefore, we have decided to send a Black Knight, 2 flag-bearers, and 10 Guardian Knights for the mission. The Runcandles and the Zippels fought daily in skirmishes large and small over land, minerals, natural resources, basically everything. If they fought over gold mines or common lands, the battle was waged with Guardian Knights and Magicians or through clans under their control. But when they had to fight over rare goods like ancient Eversteel or fairy traces, they clashed with troops and key assets. This time, the Zippels were sending the White Knight and the Kozek, while the Runcandles were responding with their Black Knight spy along with 2 flag-bearers and 10 Guardian Knights. The 2 flag-bearers will confront the Zippels along with 10 Guardian Knights and the Black Knight spy, and you will make sure the Black Knight spy dies at the hands of the enemy in battle. This was an incredibly difficult mission to accomplish. Assassinating a Black Knight itself was an achievement, but they had to induce a discreet death. The only reason they had to go to such lengths to kill a Black Knight was because of the clan's reputation. It wouldn't look good if it was known that they killed a Black Knight by fighting against a force weaker than the Kozek. Only a few within the Zippel clan are aware of the Black Knight spy. Intelligence tells us that Kiliak Zippel, Octavia Zippel, and 3 high-level elders are the only ones who know about it. This was the main reason the Runcandles were preparing this massive charade of the Black Knight assassination mission. The White Knight didn't know that the Black Knight was a Zippel spy. The Runcandles assessed that if the Black Knight was seen obliterating the White Knight right up until the moment of his assassination, the Zippels would no longer bother trying to make more Black Knight spies. And there was a clear incentive if everything went according to plan. It would effectively make the Zippels fall for their own tricks. And of course, after the death of the Black Knight spy, you must defeat the Zippel forces and secure the mine. Failure to achieve either of the 2 objectives will automatically result in failure for this mission. A brief silence followed. The flag-bearers were certain that this was by far the most difficult mission assigned to any of them in the past 2 years. The mission will commence on March 8th. Make sure all preparations are completed within that time frame. 4th flag-bearer and 12th flag-bearer, if you have any requests or complaints about the mission, now is the time to present them. Negative. Please tell us the name of the Black Knight spy. Dyphus and Jean spoke at the same time. Jean didn't have access to all the clan's files with his privileges as the 12th flagbearer. He needed access permission from at least the 4th flagbearer or higher to obtain the personal data of the Black Knights. Barton Vicina. I'll give you detailed documentation on the target, so take a look. He hadn't heard the name before. Therefore, he couldn't gain any advantage in his fight against Barton Vicina from knowledge of his past life. Thank you. This is a mission that the entire clan has put a lot of effort into preparing. I hope the 4th and 12th flagbearers bring us successful results. That's all. You may leave. The flagbearers left the office. It was strange. For some reason, Joshua didn't make any moves against Mary, who had recently stolen from his armory, or against Jean, the beneficiary of her theft. He simply walked out without looking at them. Luncia yawned a couple of times before returning to Rose's office. She didn't mean anything by it. She just went back to retrieve the documents she had left inside. Myo and didn't bother Jean either. Ran and Vuigo exchanged several glances with Jean and Mary, but that was it. The Tana twins awkwardly paced back and forth around Jean, as they did the last time, before returning to their rooms. Do those adorable fools try to fight against you like I do? Mary asked. Probably not. Well, it's good to know. Jean, I'd like to give you some advice. I'll be fine, thank you, Mary. No, I'm not fine, that's why. Try to work with Dyfus on the Black Knight assassination mission as much as possible. Even if it's just for the sake of the deal you made with me. Mary estimated that Jean was incredibly strong, but she still didn't believe he was powerful enough to take on a Black Knight, especially in such a complicated mission. Imagine how boring my life would become if you ever died or got injured. You see, the only thing holding me together these days is thinking about how I'll fight against you in 3 months when spring comes. Now I'm leaving for you two to talk. All right? Mary left. Jean and Dyfus were the only ones left in the hallway. Mary is right, Jean. Dyfus spoke first. What do you mean, Dyfus? I mean we should work together. I'm aware that you consider all your brothers as enemies. But this is an important matter. Even Father himself strictly mentioned that we should abstain from rank wars for the time being. So, are you offering that we train together until the mission begins? Yes. I reject the offer. Dyfus shrugged. And why is that? I'm confident that you can complete the mission on your own without me nearby because I personally believe you're the strongest among the brothers aside from Luna. Really? And I also don't think you're the selfless type to give me credit for the mission. So why should I train with you? I'd just be used as bait or cannon fodder anyway. It would be a waste of my precious time. Well, that wasn't my intention either. I just needed something to say when Mary asks me about it later. It seems you care a lot about Mary. Perhaps more than Luna cares about you. So, Jean. Dyfus paused and continued calmly. I hope you don't kill or disable Mary in those fights you'll have every 3 months. Is that a warning? No, it's just a request from one person to another. I'm sure you, more than anyone, understand what I mean. Jean and Dyfus's gazes clashed. They weren't filled with killing intent or a fighting spirit, but a mysterious tension filled the space between them. Do you realize that requests usually come with a price? Tell me what you want. Don't lower the class of the run candles. His cold words were spoken out of disappointment. Dyfus's eyebrows twitched. It's unbecoming of the run candles to make requests to the enemy. I'll turn a blind eye to this incident since I also have brothers I care about. But if you show such actions again, I'll no longer classify you as my enemy, Dyfus. Jean turned around. Dyfus remained lost in thought until Jean was completely out of sight. Chapter 283, Timar's First Tomb. 4. Actually, the Tana twins didn't return to their rooms. They hid behind the pillar at the end of the hallway to spy on Jean and Dyfus. The twins weren't curious about their conversation, but Emma had ordered them to bring Jean since there weren't many opportunities to get to know him. Emma was getting nervous because Jean never visited her. Dyfus seems very shaken by something. Don't you think so, Haitona? I agree. We should start walking towards Jean and... Wait, Dyfus is coming this way. Haitona whispered back. No, we're doomed. What if he interrogates us again for spying on him? Just act natural as much as possible. The Tana twins hid behind the pillar. Their hearts beat faster as Dyphus approached. Finally, he passed by them. The twins smiled awkwardly. Dyphus glanced at them indifferently and continued on. He didn't roast them like he did with Myo or En. Dyphus acted as if the Tana twins didn't exist because they weren't competitors, and they weren't worth paying attention to. In fact, Dyphus knew that the Tana twins had been hiding behind the pillar from the beginning. In any case, the twins felt relieved that nothing had happened, but they also felt their self-esteem crumbling. Outside the clan, they were known as the darlings of hell, but they had no presence among their brothers. Let's go to Jean. Yes. Their steps were somewhat dispirited, but they still walked fast enough to catch up to Jean, who was waiting for them on the other side of the hallway. Jean was also aware that the Tana twins were observing him. Hello, Jean. Ah, it's you too. Jean turned around and greeted them. The twins scratched their heads. What brings you here? Ah, about that. Would you like to have tea with us? The Tana twins were endearing in their own way. Sorry, but I'm busy today. Oh, really? How about tomorrow? I'll be busy for a while preparing for the mission. Oh, I see. Brothers. Yes. Maybe it would be good to see both of you acting on your own will occasionally, not just Emma's will. The Tana twins seemed embarrassed at the mention of Emma's name. If you had wanted to talk to me alone, I could have dedicated some time to you. The reason why other brothers look down on you is that you seem like Emma's puppets, not run candle flag bearers. Is it that bad? Does it look like that? Isn't it because we're weak? Frankly, you're not exactly weak elsewhere, you know? Both of them were 7 stars at the age of 21. They would easily be called prodigies elsewhere, but this was the run candles. The Tana twins were clearly the weakest among the flag bearers. Respect comes from attitude, remember that, and convey a message to Emma from me. Oh, okay. What is it? Tell her not to be anxious and not dare to call me unless it's so important that she absolutely needs to inform me. The Tana twins nodded with a heavy heart. They were ashamed that their younger brother was telling them what to do, but neither of them could say anything, nor did they have a need to say anything. They knew their position in the pecking order. As for Jean, he genuinely hoped that someday the Tana twins would be accepted by everyone in the clan. In his past life, Jean passionately hated the Tana twins, but he knew in this life they genuinely cared for him. We can have tea after the Black Knight assassination mission is over, or we could have a drink. Hey kid, do we really have to ride in that thing? Can't we just fly there? Murakan asked. No, we can't. It would take us centuries to fly there. Besides, I already told you. We have to be back in the clan by March 6th. Darn it, I'm going to vomit and get headaches again. What a hassle. Murakan shook his head. Jean and Murakan were in the armored carriage heading towards the gate of Kalen's limited express portal. We have arrived, young master. Thank you. You may return. Loyalty to the clan. Everyone on the street immediately turned their heads to Jean and Murakan as they stepped out of the carriage. The Run Candle flag bearers were the stars of Huffaster, which meant people looked at them nostalgically even if all they did was walk down the street. Of course, that didn't apply to the sulky ones like Myo and En. The authority of the Run Candle flag bearers was so powerful that they could have someone killed for looking at them the wrong way. Although Jin's true personality hadn't been revealed to the world yet, most people had fantasies about his character. They assumed. The young man fought alone against the Zippel and achieved victories against them in the name of justice. And they weren't entirely wrong. Perhaps it was his reputation that made the two familiar in their eyes. Passers-by talked about Jean and Murakan as they walked. They said things like, "Is that Jean Runcandle? He's so handsome. The man next to him is the legendary cat dragon. Who said I'm a cat? Damn lunatics!" Murakan suddenly yelled, causing people to lower their heads and quickly disappear from the streets. From today onwards, the rumor would spread that Jin's guardian dragon was quite obnoxious. Come on, my ears hurt. Why are you suddenly yelling? I'm annoyed about having to ride the portal gate as it is. And then those people start calling me a cat. Don't they know I can hear their whispers? Because not everyone in the world has the hearing of an 8-star martial artist. Most would assume you can't hear their whispers. Who cares? Oh, I'm so angry. Murakan was agitated for a reason. Last night, he had asked Gilly out on a date and was rejected. Strawberry pie. I heard there are many nice places to go in. Kalen, why don't we go to all of them one by one together? We won't have to hide our identities anymore. So we can comfortably explore the city and have a drink. I'm sorry, Murakan. I think I should watch my actions until young Master Jean is fully settled and finds his place in the clan. This conversation had put Murakan in a bad mood. Become the patriarch already. I feel frustrated, he told Jean. Speak quieter. People can hear you. Don't go around saying things like that. The Great Plains of Ans were Chukon Tolder's land, right? That means there might be remnants of the Dark Magic Guild there as well. If I see any of them there, oh, they'll get the beating of their lives. I mean it. We took down the Dark Magic Guild last time. I hope there are still some left. What a horrible suggestion. There weren't many people at the Limited Express portal gate. The staff immediately called the portal guardian upon seeing Jin's flag-bearer coat. The guardian guided Jin to the seats dedicated to the flag-bearers, located in the inner area, with utmost courtesy. Sir Jean Runcandle, it is an honor to serve. You. Please tell me your destination. The nearest portal to the Ola Mountain Range. Understood, sir. What should I do with the portal usage records? Have them erased so that no one can access them. Yes, sir. Wishing you a comfortable journey. Whoosh. The portal opened once the guardian left. Kid. But why the Ola Mountains? Aren't we supposed to go to the Great Plains of Ans? I thought we were short on time. Earlier, you said we had to hurry. I want to test the guardian. Blue mana enveloped the two of them. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves at an ancient portal near the Ola Mountains. The knights standing by the gate greeted Jean. Meanwhile, Murakan spent some time vomiting. Disgusting. No need for attendance. I have come for a personal matter and don't need anyone to cater to me. Go ahead. Jean mounted Murakan and deliberately took off flying while the knights kept a watchful eye on him. They flew towards the Ola Mountains. Then they flew to various places in the area for several hours until they hid in a deep valley of the mountain range to disguise themselves with golden mouse hair dye and makeup. These products could create highly convincing disguises without much trouble. Yes, those golden mice didn't put much effort into making these things. No wonder they became so rich. Murakan, apply some of this too. People might recognize you even if you turn into a cat nowadays. He carefully folded his flag-bearer cloak and put it in his bag. In its place, he wore an ordinary robe. Both of them dyed their hair blue. I thought I wouldn't have to disguise myself anymore after you became a flag-bearer. Do I really have to do this? Murakan asked. Better safe than sorry. I almost miss my days as a provisional flag-bearer. Let's head towards the Great Plains of Ans. Jean took out the red ruby to summon Shuri. They silently rode on the gigantic feline through the mountains. They crossed the mountain range during the night and sailed across the sea by morning. Murakan didn't fly a single minute throughout the entire journey. It was nighttime again when they crossed a forest. Beyond the forest lay the Great Plains of Ans. The Great Plains were much like the vast desert of Mitra, but covered in grass. The vast fields of green grass gracefully danced in the wind. They had to ride for a full day from there to reach Valai, where Pekan Minche said the first tomb of Timar was located. Fortunately, Murakan's hopes were not fulfilled. There were no remnants of the Dark Magic Guild in the Great Plains. They did spot a couple of ascetic sorcerers in the distance. They were nothing more than ordinary magicians, but Jean had to put in a lot of effort to stop Murakan, who was fully convinced they were remnants of the Dark Magic Guild, although the sorcerers paid no attention to them. When they arrived at their destination, Shuri whimpered in exhaustion, albeit quite adorably. You did a great job, Shuri. The only people the Jean group encountered on their way to Valai were a group of nomads. But they didn't use the continental language, nor did they realize Jean was a martial artist. Valai seemed like a small hill amidst the plain. But the real reason the Valai area had a hill-like shape was that it used to be a gigantic burial mound. Murakan's eyes sparkled as he recognized it. He had been quite suspicious of Pekan's words, but upon arriving at Valai, he intuitively realized that it was indeed where Timar had been buried. "Bring out the key, kid. Have you found anything yet?" "No, Sir Joshua." The gate guardian clearly stated that the 12th flag-bearer was heading to the Ola mountain range. "We searched every nook and cranny of the mountains, but found nothing noteworthy." Jean was right. Although the portal usage records had been erased, the guardian's memory remained intact, and he informed Joshua of Jin's destination even before he asked. "Ola Mountains? Is there something related to Sadaret in that area? Or something he obtained in his days as a provisional flag-bearer? Is it a person? I need to find out what Jean is looking for there." Joshua felt frustrated because his guardian knights were unable to find any information. Just then, Joshua realized that Jean couldn't have acted so carelessly. He suspected that Jean would have expected him to investigate and deliberately fed the guardian false information. He soon convinced himself of his assumption. "Darn it! Sir Joshua? I was too impatient. Gather all the forces. Dismiss the guardian and give him a decent retirement package." "Understood, sir." Joshua took a long drag from his cigarette. Tasted bitter in more ways than one. Chapter 284. Timar's First Tomb. 5. The dawn light shone upon Valai. Murakan held the key, but he couldn't help but feel bitter. Remorse, sadness, longing, self-contempt, and powerlessness overwhelmed him. All these dark and heavy emotions pierced his heart. A friend, more precious than anyone or anything else. That's what Timar was to Murakan. If Timar desired something, Murakan was willing to fight against all odds. And if Timar were in mortal danger, he would gladly give up his own life to save him. But he couldn't. If the ancient dark dragon of over 3,000 years were to choose the most devastating memory of his life, it would undoubtedly be Timar's death. Shuri licked Murakan's shoulder. He didn't respond despite Shuri's multiple licks, so Shuri let out a mournful cry and returned to the red ruby. Murakan. Jean couldn't say much either. It wasn't normal for Murakan to be so saddened. Jean had also lost someone he cherished more than anyone in his past life. On the day he was banished from the Garden of Swords, Gilly was stripped of her aura and had to endure a punishment worse than death itself. Suddenly, Jean was reminded of what he last saw of Gilly in his past life, which made him feel distressed as well. Murakan's hand trembled as he held the key. Then he held the key with both hands and pressed it against his chest. His massive physique suddenly seemed like a withered branch, and his back began to shake. Was he crying in sorrow for his poor, old friend who had left after leaving him with scars? Jean slowly approached Murakan. The dragon seemed to need comfort. "Darn it! What the hell is wrong? Curse it all." Murakan cursed aloud. "Huh? What? Murakan? I'm referring to this key. I've infused it with tons of shadow energy, and yet, it won't budge. Now, everything wants to irritate the great Murakan, doesn't it? Well, let's see who wins this game, you damn little toy." Murakan had indeed been trembling, but not because he was sobbing. He trembled because he was infusing large amounts of shadow energy into the key. That's also why he held the key against his chest. At first, he casually infused shadow energy into the key with one hand. But once he realized nothing was happening, he started using both hands to infuse large amounts of shadow energy. "Come on, activate already. I think it has absorbed a 5-star worth of energy." Jean felt quite perplexed but soon let out a chuckle. "Stop getting so worked up. I'll send Gilly on vacation as soon as we return, so maybe you two can go on a trip together." Fling. Murakan turned his head at lightning speed. "Are you serious?" "Of course. It won't be anything too difficult. Finally, it's about time you repay me for raising you, brat." "Wahaha, that's right. Give her a nice, long vacation while you're at it so I can have a happy trip with Strawberry Pie and Dash." "But Strawberry Pie, Gilly might reject you too, you know? Have you ever considered that?" "What?" "You seem to think that Gilly would obviously accept a date with you if only she had a vacation. I wonder if you can handle another rejection. It's going to hurt, you know?" Murakan was almost furious, but instead, he decided to mock Jean. Humph. Wahaha, you know nothing. Well, on the other hand, you've been in La Ferosa since late 1797. Anyway, promise me you won't back out on the offer, since she'll surely accept me. His response left Jean mysteriously annoyed. It didn't seem like anything was going on between him and Gilly. Why is he so confident? I mean, is it true that those two are dating? Why do I care so much about these things? Why is it so annoying? And Murakan thought I just gave a response because the brat was so annoying. But what if she really rejects me? Of course, neither Jean nor Murakan could read each other's minds. Sure. Go ahead and activate the key now. Oh great dark dragon. Yes, just you wait. Murakan began infusing his shadow energy into the key again. But it still wouldn't move, no matter how desperately he poured his strength into it. At that moment, all the veins on Murakan's neck burst from the effort. Sodaret, that scoundrel. Why did he make such a contraption? Murakan tossed the key to the ground and gasped for breath. Maybe he's doing it wrong? Or maybe Pecan told us something wrong. Neither of those things are true. I've told you Sodaret used to make a bunch of these things. And Pecan can't be wrong either because this is indeed where Timar was buried. I can feel it. Then why isn't it working? Room. Murakan suddenly transformed into his true form. Jean instinctively looked around. They were in an open plain. There was nothing that could hide Murakan. Why do you think we came all the way to the Ola Mountains? If someone sees you, all the effort will be wasted. Why are you suddenly transforming? I don't think this key activates with your usual dose of shadow energy. I've already put all the shadow energy I can in my human form. Surprised, Jean looked at Murakan. What? How much shadow energy could this object possibly need? It's time to find out. Stay alert. If you see any remnants of the Dark Magic Guild, eliminate them. I told you, such things don't exist anymore. Surprisingly, it took 8 hours until the key reacted. Fortunately, nobody noticed Murakan sitting in the middle of Valai, struggling with the tiny object. Murakan squeezed out the last of his remaining shadow energy. That was when the key slowly levitated from the tip of Murakan's claw into the air. Yes, it's working. Ugh. Everything hurts. Is it done? Finally. Murakan transformed back into his human form and stood beside Jean. He seemed completely exhausted. No, he wasn't just exhausted. He looked pale and on the verge of collapsing at any moment. The key floated in the air and halted its movement. Then the two of them felt the area surrounding them suddenly darken, as if a surge of shadow energy was being released. Indeed, it was the shadow energy from the key that had darkened the world around them. The shadow energy from the key enveloped the entire Valai area in a dark semisphere. What is this? And more importantly, something of this magnitude could easily expose us to the whole world. It was also the first time Murakan had seen something like this. Jean was starting to think that all his effort to detour through the Ola Mountains had gone to waste. Just then, he felt the dark force semisphere covering Valai gradually shrinking. It was as if a giant hand outside the sphere was squeezing it downward. It became so small that the edge of the semisphere was about to touch Jean and Murakan. Finally, the semisphere turned into a tiny dot and disappeared completely. At that moment, Valai was a hill of green grass as usual, but Jean and Murakan, who had been standing there, were no longer visible. They had been absorbed into the ethereal plane formed by the shadow energy. Well, I knew I was absorbing too much shadow energy. Was it an ethereal plane? Murakan laughed. Jean looked around, scared and suspicious of the sudden spatial change. It was dark and completely devoid of everything. At the same time, it was so vast that he could barely guess the size of the place. This desolate place was Timar Runcandle's first tomb. Sodaret did so much to conceal it, and yet those Zippel bastards came here and plundered it. Murakan shook his head, barely controlling his anger. Create a flower with your shadow energy, kid. Jean had never tried anything like that before, but it wasn't too difficult since all he had to do was shape the shadow energy into a flower. Jean created an artificial flower with shadow energy and placed it on the ground. His body is no longer here, but we still need to leave a flower. Jean left the flower on the ground. They stood in silence for a minute. Both paid their respects, Murakin as a friend and Jean as a descendant. Kid. Yes. Thank you. A wind blew from a direction after they paid their respects. The wind gently carried away the flower and passed by indifferently. The rookie god of blacksmiths, Pekan Minche, said that you would meet here with those whom Timar trusted. Right? That's right. He also said that he needed something from this place to strengthen Bradamanti. I've been thinking a lot on the way here about what Timar's first tomb would be like and what you still had to gain from this place after it was completely plundered. Well, things like that. But I didn't come up with much. But now that I see this ethereal plane, I've realized something. Murakin suddenly stopped because he had a bad feeling. Meanwhile, Jean recalled the conversation he had with Pekan Minche. There's an area called Valai in the Great Ens Plains, in the central area of the plains. Go there and infuse shadow energy into this key. Then it will reveal his first tomb to you. Is there anything I should be aware of? No matter what happens there, don't panic. That's what Sodaret wanted me to tell you. Is there anything else? Nothing. I wish you luck in your battles. Jean Runcandle. For some reason, the phrase about wishing him luck had disturbed Jean. Why was he being wished luck in battle when he was going to meet someone Timar had trusted? It was hard to understand. Kid, I think there's a guardian. A guardian still resides in this tomb. A guardian? Yes, the protector of the tomb. And the reason Sodaret bothered to create a key that would only activate with so much shadow energy was because he wanted you to have enough shadow energy when you used the key to come here. Pekan hadn't told him about these things, and neither had Sodaret. In any case, the key would never have worked if he didn't have enough shadow energy anyway. But there was a problem. The person who activated the key wasn't Jean. It was Murakin. And indeed, Murakin was completely depleted of shadow energy because of it. Murakin, do you think I would have been able to activate the key with my shadow energy? No way. The great Murakin himself needed 8 hours and every last drop of his shadow energy to activate it. There's no way you could have done it with your 7-star shadow energy. So, that means I don't actually qualify to be here, do I? And you won't be able to fight if that guardian thing appears since you've also run out of shadow energy, right? That's right. But well, I doubt anything will happen. Who knows? Maybe there are no guardians to begin with. We'll find out soon enough. Murakin had just finished his sentence when a sublime voice resonated from afar. Has the contractor of Sodaret come to pay respects to Timar? Upon hearing the voice, Murakin recognized who it was and slapped his hand on his forehead. He used to hear this voice every day 1,000 years ago. This is Sildure's voice. Sildure Jizek was one of the biggest contributors to Timar founding the Runcandle clan. The great knight whose legend and records were erased by the Zipples. The guardian of this tomb was the will of Sildure Jizek himself. Chapter 285. Timar's First Tomb. 6. So, who is Sildure? Jean had never heard of his name, neither in all his clan history classes at Stormcastle nor in his cadet days because the Zipples had erased every single record related to Sildure. They still couldn't see Sildure, although they could sense a massive force of unknown capacity somewhere in the darkness. It was like witnessing the emergence of a giant sea monster from the depths of the ocean. Jean didn't need to face it to recognize the immense power of his enemy. He could feel his hair standing on end, along with a faint sense of exhilaration. Shing. Sigmund's pale sword left its sheath and gleamed in the darkness. He was one of Timar's 10 knights. He could be said to be the progenitor of the Runcandle Black Knights. His surname was Jizek, but later he changed it to Runcandle when Timar did. The progenitor of the Black Knights. How interesting. Murakin seemed completely taken aback by Jin's response. Interesting? In this situation, you're going crazy too. Right now, I'm incapacitated and unable to fight. If that guardian is an exact replica, then, whoa, there's no way we can handle this. We barely have a chance of winning. You never know until you try. Who knows? Maybe we won't end up fighting. He asked if I came to pay my respects, so perhaps he'll be more accommodating than we think. That won't happen. It's not Silduray in person. It's just a guardian created in his image. And guardians are created with the sole purpose of mutilating all intruders. The energy of the guardian drew near. Muraken was right. Its energy was clearly filled with a desire to fight. Its fighting spirit was so fierce and immense that Jean could almost feel it burning against his skin. Tell me. Tell you what? Silduray's exploits, as you remember them. 10 stars. And exceptional besides. Fortunately, he's not a swordsman like the pure-blooded Runcandles. Then I must pray that he's not a likeness of his firstborn. There doesn't seem to be a way to escape this plane, right? We either put the same amount of shadow energy into the key or the guardian shows the way. It must be one of the two. Alright, the fight is inevitable then. Let's see what happens after I cross swords with him and assess our options. Then, Jean assumed his stance. Muraken observed him and thought to himself. For some reason, this crazy kid seems to be enjoying this. To some extent, it was true. Jean was satisfied to have the opportunity to fight against Silduray, one of the progenitors of the Black Knights. However, his satisfaction didn't stem merely from his love for battle or his sheer recklessness as a warrior. Each of the trials that Sodaret had put him through was a test designed for him to overcome. Plus, he wouldn't have many opportunities to test himself against a 10-star knight. There weren't many days left until the assassination of Barton Vicina, another powerful knight and Black Knight spy. The Guardian was the perfect opponent to experience firsthand what it meant to fight a 10-star knight. And most importantly, Jean didn't believe he was as useless as Muraken thought. If things go wrong, I can always summon my La Ferosa brothers, although I'd prefer not to if I can avoid it. Finally, the Guardian revealed itself from the edge of darkness. It wore armor similar to that of the Runcandle Guardian Knights. It had a massive physique, overflowing muscles that refused to be hidden under the armor, and a sharp, intense gaze that seemed capable of cutting through steel. It wielded an impressive giant sword, larger than its own body. It was more solid than Luna's axe sword, and seemed to mock the fact that Silduray's name had never been passed down through generations. Anyone who could wield that enormous sword at will should have been part of martial arts history. The Guardian halted about 20 paces away from the two. It was a Guardian formed from the same principle as Jin's dark light calling. Sodaret had molded Silduray's soul and will with shadow energy, so that the dead could temporarily appear in the world of the living when certain conditions were met. Jean and Muraken realized this fact as they saw the Guardian. I am the Guardian of this tomb, Silduray Runcandle. Hey Silduray, don't you recognize me? Muraken stepped forward and shouted. The Guardian fixed its eyes on Jean and completely ignored Muraken. Answer me, Silduray. Answer. I am Muraken, the Dark Dragon. I don't know that useless soulless one. What useless soulless one? Get lost. My business isn't with you. Wow, the things he says. Sure, I may have lost the powers of my prime, and yes, I may be completely devoid of shadow energy right now. But how dare you say those things to me, Silduray? I was your lord's guardian dragon, Timar. Mention Timar Nim's name once more, and I'll slit your throat without warning. The Guardian seemed resentful towards Muraken for some reason. Being a perfect replica of Silduray made with shadow energy, its memories remained intact. Muraken glared at the Guardian with hatred. The dragon wanted to beat him up, but that had always been quite a challenging task for Muraken, even in his prime. For now, he didn't even have shadow energy left, so he had to hold back. State your name, the last contractor of Sodaret. I am Jean Runcandle. Silduray's eyes turned pensive. Sodaret has fulfilled his promise. Now it's my turn to fulfill the promise. Whoosh! Silduray gently swung the giant sword. The mere swing generated a strong sword wind that tousled Jean and Muraken's hair. I, Silduray Runcandle of the 10 Knights, will pass on my will to the last contractor of Sodaret according to the ancient promise I made with the Shadow God. The transmission of his testament. Its implication was simple. Contractor Jean Runcandle, prepare yourself to fight me. Guardian Sir Silduray Runcandle, please promise me one thing. Despite his polite words, Jin stared into the Guardian's eyes as if he wanted to make a demand, not a request. Speak. Murakin is currently unable to fight. Would you do me the favor of sparing his life? As long as he doesn't interfere. Thank you. That was more than enough, even though it hurt Murakin's pride. Accept the outcome of the battle humbly. Just after uttering his final word, the Guardian's giant sword flashed. It was literally a flash of light. It was the result of the giant sword's swift movement. No one would believe how fast this enormous sword could move until they saw it with their own eyes. Shik, Zaz. The giant sword clashed against Sigmund and emitted a deafening noise. The hard stone floor was crushed. The broken pieces of rock turned back into shadow energy and evaporated. The shockwave ravaged the surrounding area. Jin gritted his teeth. If he hadn't spent the past year getting used to the battle techniques of the Battle Kings or had the chance to experience Vanessa's sword, he would have been dumbfounded at the first strike. This is amazing. The Guardian's strike carried the weight of a mountain and the cutting edge of serrated obsidian. Murakin was sent flying through the air. The shockwave from the first strike sent him tumbling across the ground. Fortunately, he didn't seem to have suffered any serious injuries. Murakin finally landed and muttered all kinds of curses as he distanced himself from the battle. The Guardian didn't bother pursuing him. The second and third strikes came at Jin. Each clash of the sword brought the excruciating pain of bones on the verge of breaking and skin tearing. But despite the pain, Jin's body distributed and withstood the blow. All my training has paid off. 10 stars. One step away from reaching the divine star. There was no way to know if the Guardian was a perfect emulation of Sildare, who was supposed to be an exceptional 10-star knight. But Jin could confidently say that these simple attacks held the power of a 10-star knight behind them. Their destructive force was on par with Vanessa's or the Battle King's. Jin was countering the attacks of this Guardian with pure sword skill alone. But I don't see any chance for a counterattack. That was the problem. He was defending so desperately that he had no time to attack. The Guardian's giant sword flickered several times per second to press Jin from all directions. The Guardian was clearly and immensely stronger than Jin. But Jin had always fought against stronger enemies. Every time he faced an enemy more powerful than himself, there was disorder with the element of surprise. His ability to respond calmly in battle came from knowing that his enemies didn't know all his cards. The photon cannon, Myalta's rune, the legend's lightning energy, shadow energy, and more. His movements consistently produced great results. But would they work against a 10-star knight as well? Jin realized the answer to the question was no when he fought through Vanessa's trial. At that time, she faced the photon cannon and legend's sword techniques as if they were nothing more than intriguing tricks. It was as if the element of surprise meant nothing to the master swordsmen who were at the pinnacle of what could be achieved with a sword. Any technique that didn't have a similar depth and mastery to theirs was nothing more than a trivial spectacle. I must use the battle god's combat techniques from the beginning. The rest won't work against him at all. Of course, lightning and despotism were certainly powerful techniques in their own right. But Jin couldn't execute them at a 10-star level yet. Using them to create mildly effective openings or illusions would only lead to his own loss. First, I'll summon Test to buy time and use the battle god's combat technique, erosion, to create space for myself. Damn it. The dimensional gate won't open. Is it another dead realm? Jin performed the summoning to open the dimensional gate to the realm of fire, but the gate refused to open. Jin knew from experience that the dimensional gate wouldn't open in dead realms. This ethereal plane created by Sodaret was another dead realm. He desperately attempted the dark light calling with the same effect. No summoning was possible in dead realms. It seems you tried some things, but all failed. Nevertheless, I'm impressed that you haven't lost your composure. The Guardian swung the giant sword with even greater force this time. That was when Jin retreated for the first time. The difference in their abilities was becoming more noticeable. Pure strength, precision, and experience. Needless to say, the Guardian surpassed Jin in every aspect. A drop of blood trickled from Jin's lips. His mouth was cut by the impact, but his internal organs remained intact. Darn it! I had no idea this was a dead realm. Next time I enter an unknown space, I'll remember to first check if summonings work. Jean caught his breath. Although what he had saved for the worst-case scenario was blocked, that didn't mean everything was over yet. He really didn't want to use this because the mission was still a few days away. The lightning energy began to surge within his light heart. If this didn't work, the only thing left was to pray and escape. Chapter 286. Timar's First Tomb, 7. The dense lightning energy in the light heart made it seem as if a small sun was radiating its light from the center of Jin's chest. The strong white light shone through his shirt and began to cast a glow around him. And it went beyond that. As more lightning energy gathered in his light heart, it immediately illuminated the dark ethereal plane. The Guardian didn't seem to comprehend what was happening, but sensed that a great change had occurred within Jin. It must be the lightning energy. Without a doubt, it's an intriguing power, just as Timar described it. His attacks continued. The Guardian's giant sword now sent enormous waves that could split entire warships in half. Jin was completely engulfed in those blade waves and barely clung to life. It didn't seem like he would last much longer. Jin's movements had noticeably slowed down after the lightning energy began surging into his light heart. Jin was gathering lightning energy for the battle god's combat technique, which naturally affected his level of concentration. Did you think you could afford to make such mistakes in front of me? The Guardian's giant sword swung in. A vertical slash, creating an ugly tear in the air. Even the most common vertical strike of a 10-star knight was as powerful as a master's move, and Jin certainly couldn't avoid it with his sluggish movements. The best he could do was dodge it. Jin gritted his teeth and moved aside. He maintained his posture, and Sildure's giant sword struck the ground. Dodging the strike of a 10-star knight was entirely different from dodging any other attack. Simply getting out of the sword's path was not enough because the shockwaves created in the sword's movement through the air alone were as powerful as 8-star attacks. Schluck! Sheik! The shockwave cut Jin near his Adam's apple. If the cut had been deeper, the damage would have been critical. Another shockwave grazed his chest and shoulder. His blood sprayed in an arc. His coat and shirt tore and burned from the heat of the aura, revealing a luminous heart charged with lightning energy. It was radiant. Sildure momentarily squinted his eyes when he suddenly faced the light of the light heart. That brief instant was the first opportunity Jin had since the battle began. Jin chose to create distance rather than attack, but he only managed to step back once, as Sildure still controlled the distance. That single step felt precious to Jin. It didn't take him out of Sildure's attack range, but that one step allowed him to breathe away from the intense aura exuding from his opponent. It felt as if Jin had gained distance from the active volcano that was Sildure. He felt as if his entire body was being pressed by his aura just by staying close to him. It was the blessed body of the run candles that kept him moving. Now that he had earned a breather for himself, it was time to complete the battle god's combat technique. Countless lightning energy flooded his light heart, which seemed on the verge of blazing. That was the full capacity of Jin's lightning energy. It seems you have completed what you have been preparing all this time, Jin Runcandle. The Guardian smiled weakly, as if he had been waiting for this moment. In reality, he had been controlling his attacks so that Jin could complete the battle god's combat technique. Therefore, his smile held several meanings. On one hand, curiosity and anticipation regarding Jin's power. And on the other hand, his reprimand for the fact that Jin wouldn't have evaded death if this had been a real battle, not Soderet's trial. I'm almost offended. Zaz, Pum. Jin read him through his smile and replied while dispersing the sword waves. Sildure's sword waves shattered with deafening noises. Because I waited for you? If this had been a real battle, I wouldn't have faced you like this, Lord Sildure. The Guardian smiled. What Jin had just shown reminded him of the man he respected and obeyed all his life and in his youth. Timar Runcandle. That's how he was. No matter who he faced. He always faced a challenge without being arrogant and was calculating despite appearing reckless. That's why everyone around Timar saw him as a mystery. You resemble him a lot. It's not an expression I appreciate. KZZT. Something sounded as if it was being crushed inside the light heart. The dense lightning energy exposed on the surface of the light heart knotted around the heart like thick ropes, making it seem as if the heart had cracked. Jin planned to perform the 10th Battle God's combat technique. It was the final movement of the Battle God and the greatest profound mystery, encompassing all his techniques. It was the reign of the King of Legends, the initiation. When Vaughn taught Jin the 10th Battle God's combat technique, he told him that this movement was not a mere killing technique created to destroy enemies. The reign of the King of Legends was the roaring declaration of a man who had reached the pinnacle among the kings of light. The ground they stood on began to crack. It twisted violently, and cracks spewed out lightning energy like lava. The entire area was immediately covered with the devastating forces of lightning energy, making it impossible to breathe. It wasn't just a figure of speech. Anyone who couldn't shield themselves from this torrent of energy would turn into ashes within seconds. Those who could only gather to cast shield barriers would suffocate over time. And it had nothing to do with Jin's intentions. Fire never discriminates whom it burns. Only those who were worthy could survive the lightning of the reign of the King of Legends. It was a privilege granted only to those who could at least match the strength of the most powerful race ever known in the world. That's why my brothers no longer call me Timar like Sir Silduray. Jin's voice was different. For some mysterious reason, it sounded as if dozens of people were speaking in unison. Needless to say, there was a deep, majestic tone in his voice. His eyes and hair were now filled with lightning energy, emitting a bright blue color. If there were a lightning god revered by the masses, it would probably look like this. The Guardian thought the same. However, his superior perception was not deceived by his thoughts. Appearing transcendent doesn't mean you truly are. But I am intrigued nonetheless. 10 stars. A height where one truly understands that they are very close to being the most powerful. The Guardian knew what it meant to be transcendent precisely because he was within reach of such heights. And transcendent was a term only granted to those who had reached the divine star. Although Jin had activated the reign of the King of Legends, the Guardian could see that it was nothing more than a burst of Jin's potential. But, of course, that still shocked him considerably. I see there is less room to attack now. Let's start again. Room! Waves burst forth from the Guardian's gigantic sword. They cut through Jin's lightning bolts as if piercing through water, but their impact was greatly reduced when they reached Jin. The lightning energy dampened their power. Similarly, Silduray's movements were slightly restricted. On the other hand, lightning felt natural to Jin after activating the reign of the King of Legends. Unlike the Guardian, who couldn't fully unleash his power while resisting the lightning, Jin's sword movements were deadlier than ever. The reign of the King of Legends wasn't a simple movement. It was an ability that elevated other abilities. One that could turn an ordinary vertical strike into a master's move. Now, this wasn't only true for the Guardian. It applied to Jin as well. This was what Vaughn told him before leaving La Ferosa, right after mastering the reign of the King of Legends. I might have mentioned it to you last time, Brother Jin. You are a brother of the legends, our descendant, and my heir. Therefore, you must never be afraid, no matter whom you have to face. The lightning covering the battlefield moved along with the Sigmund. Jin swung his sword upward as the Guardian struck downward. Their swings were so fast that they both went after each other's afterimages. The clash of swords revealed a new dynamic in their battle. A stalemate. Who would have imagined it was a battle between a 10-star knight and an 8-star swordsman? The two swords struggled to push each other away, and it was difficult to tell which was superior. Amazing! The Guardian didn't offer clichés like compliments or show any signs of satisfaction. Such things were only appropriate when facing an opponent who was clearly inferior in terms of skill. The Guardian no longer needed to evaluate the young descendant of the clan before him. Now, he only had to accept Jin as a worthy enemy to commemorate his final battle as a Guardian. This meant he could no longer afford to be lenient with him. Just as Jin was giving his all, he had to give his all as well. Pum, pum, clang. The ethereal plane gradually descended from the shockwave, creating swirling shadow energy that scattered like sand. The chaotic scene of lightning energy, sword waves, and shadow energy was certainly worthy of being called the battlefield of great warriors. Just as Sildare remained humble, Jean also didn't let the current rhythm get to his head. I can't last long in this state. I must finish it as soon as possible. The lightning energy fiercely gathered towards the Sigmund, and for the first time in the battle, the Guardian took a step back. Jean seized the opportunity to perform the third movement of the battle god's combat technique, Retribution, to push him further back. Retribution was obviously much stronger now with the Reign of the King of Legends activated. 3 spikes of Retribution formed simultaneously and flew toward the Guardian. Supposedly, the Reign of the King of Legends required 3 stages to complete: initiation, progression, and conclusion. But at Jin's current level, activating initiation already demanded a lot from him. Therefore, overlaying another battle god's combat technique was undoubtedly an overwhelming task. However, Jin had a clear reason for using Retribution. He assumed that the Guardian didn't possess the blessed body of the run candles. Sir Sildare will have to use large amounts of aura if he wants to block the Retribution performed with the Reign of the King of Legends. If both of us suffer the impact of the outburst, I'm likely to end up on the better side. Jin's assessment was accurate. The Guardian, Sildare Runcandle, had blocked all attacks so far without significant changes in his expression. But now he seemed serious, as if this attack was quite difficult for him to handle. But obviously it wasn't out of fear. It was out of a particular resolve. I will show you the legacy of your Runcandle ancestors, dear descendant. The spikes of Retribution struck Sildare's shield barrier. Cracks immediately formed in the shield, and it would only take a blink of an eye for the shield to shatter completely. But that split second was more than enough. It was all Jean needed to reveal one of the supreme moves of the Runcandle sword technique created by Timar and the 10 Knights 1,000 years ago. The secret move of the Runcandle clan. Giant Sword King Jean stopped exerting more force on the spikes and inwardly gasped for breath. The Guardian's giant sword was already enormous on its own. But now it was becoming terrifyingly colossal. He had seen people extend their swords with aura countless times in training. But he had never imagined a sword so ridiculously massive. The giant shadow energy sword immediately toward the sky as if it wanted to pierce through and rise above the lightning. Chapter 287. Timar's First Tomb 8. It was outrageously enormous. Jean couldn't think of any other way to describe it. The aura transformed the gigantic sword into a tower so massive that he could barely look up to see where it ended. The blade was easily dozens of times larger than its wielder, and yet the Guardian held it in his hands as if it weighed nothing. What is this? I mean, can it even be called a sword? Jean didn't believe he would blink, no matter what was thrown at him. But this was something that even Jean felt completely amazed by. The Guardian's giant sword was not only immensely long. Even its width was so vast that it seemed atrocious. This indescribably excessive expansion had been caused by the aura. The 3 spikes had already pierced through the shield barrier, but the repulsive forces of the giant sword prevented them from piercing the Guardian, who now smiled confidently. His descendant was showing him a satisfied face after facing the master move he had spent his entire life creating. This is the secret move called Giant Sword King. No matter how amazing my enemies were, they all had a stunned look like yours when they faced it for the first time. Jean couldn't respond. He could only look at the Guardian and his giant sword. The battle seemed to have entered a state of calm. But despite how it seemed, their energies were still desperately fighting to push each other away. Perhaps they had reached some kind of equilibrium. In the fragile balance of these two forces, the first one to lose concentration would suffer quite unpleasant consequences. Jean breathed carefully. He calmed his light heart, which had become unstable after executing Retribution. Blood started to flow from every opening on his face. Giant Sword King? Undoubtedly, the denomination was accurate. No one could argue against it. There would definitely be no larger giant sword than this. As far as Jean knew, the Runcandle clan had 10 ultimate moves, 7 secret moves, and 3 profound mysteries. None of them were even remotely similar to this. After the Zippel erased all records related to Sildare Runcandle, his renowned move, Giant Sword King, was also lost along with his name. I spent many days trying to come up with its name with Timar. Don't you appreciate the beauty of its name? I'm not so sure about that. What a shame. Gruer. Aura surged around the Guardian once again. It rose in the air, transforming into several dozen cord-like forms and started to wrap around the giant sword. It helped the Guardian hold and swing the massive sword, or rather, that enormous mass of aura. Karg, the Guardian shouted. Just as Jean was covered in lightning energy after activating the Reign of the King of Legends, the Guardian's body was also becoming brilliantly white due to the aura. But the difference was that he was becoming one with the giant sword. Countless martial artists in the world claimed that becoming one with the weapon was the ultimate mastery one could achieve as a martial artist. But obviously it was a figurative expression. It had nothing to do with this abnormal sword technique that the Guardian was executing. However, Jean swallowed saliva and felt chills. It wasn't his martial artist senses or his intuition, honed through countless trials, that told him it was dangerous. It was simple. It was the visual impact, the visual terror of the ridiculous scale of things that humans certainly should not be allowed to accomplish at all. This is quite shocking. Jean was convinced. Even if historians hadn't written a single line about the Giant Sword King, it would undoubtedly have survived for 1,000 years through word of mouth alone. On the other hand, he was also amazed that the Zippel could completely erase such impactful sword techniques from history. Try this. The Giant Sword King began to descend toward the ground. It was as slow as the midday sun sinking on the horizon. It was even slower than Siren's strike that Jean resisted on the day he returned to the Garden of Swords after completing his training as a provisional flag-bearer. Despite its tremendous size, the slowness made it seem like even untrained people could move away from the giant sword. But it was impossible to escape the technique, despite its slow descent. It wasn't because the movement was beyond the principles of nature, like Siren's sword skill. It was the repulsive force that had kept the spikes of retribution at bay. That same repulsive force now pressed downward, crushing Jean like Tessa's pressure. It was as if thousands of invisible hands were pulling his body downward. As heavy even after activating the Reign of the King of Legends. But indeed, the Reign of the King of Legends was the only thing allowing him to breathe and move. Jin's aura alone wasn't enough to bear the weight exuded by the Giant Sword King. It was the same principle as the lightning of the Reign of the King of Legends, which demanded that one be at least on par with the legends to survive it. Jean tried to move away and noticed that his feet weighed incredibly heavy. It wouldn't be easy to escape the range of the giant sword even if he focused all his effort on it. In fact, it was impossible to escape its range. He had to strike back with his sword. It falls very slowly, but I have no choice but to strike back. What a terrifying secret move. How long will it take for the giant sword to touch the ground? 30 seconds? 20 seconds? Jean took a breath again. He could feel the rattling of every joint in his body as the Giant Sword King approached. Moreover, Jean was starting to pay the price for executing an incomplete Reign of the King of Legends. My body is nearing its limit. The blue-tinged lightning energy in Jin's eyes and hair noticeably faded. The Reign of the King of Legends was nearing its end, while the Guardian's aura grew increasingly brighter. In Sildure's days, that's what martial artists called him. A monstrous strength. Sildure of monstrous strength. Literally, a knight with a monstrous amount of brute force. Indeed, he wasn't even a pure-blooded run candle. As Jean suspected, he didn't possess the blessed body of the run candles. Yet, he was capable of performing indescribable feats. Jean looked at the sword and adjusted his stance. There are people who have reached extreme heights with just one chance in life. Yes, the fact that I was fortunate enough to go to La Ferosa never meant that I was strong enough to challenge them. I almost rushed ahead there. First of all, there was his father, Siren Runcandle. Then his older sister Luna, Vanessa, Timar, and others. These transcendental swordsmen had always seemed like a mystery to Jean. They were immense mountains. Sometimes they also served as markers or milestones in his life journey. And now, Jean achieved another milestone called Sildure Runcandle. Jean was lucky to have a second chance in life and to meet incredible people who helped him. Finally, Jean had to rise above all of that and surpass them all. With pleasure. Shwoom. The lightning energy of the reign of the King of Legends faded away. The light heart seemed empty after losing its light. Jean vomited blood after losing his activated energy. Aura backlash, multiple fractures, and internal injuries. That should have been the fair result that Jean received when facing the Guardian without what he had gained through fortunate encounters. It was impossible for the 12th flag-bearer of the Run Candles, who had not yet turned 20, to confront one of the 10 Knights of Timar Runcandle, said to be the most powerful in history. However, Jin's strength was not based solely on his return to life and his fortunate encounters. They only served an auxiliary purpose because Jin always had something much brighter and more precious than anything else. His willpower. That immeasurable strength allowed him to hold onto the sword against any adversity. If the Guardian's secret move, which made his light shine over the entire ethereal plane, was the legacy of the Runcandle ancestors, Jin's willpower was the very light carried by the clan's lineage. Soon the giant Sword King fell to the ground, and the Guardian had to praise the brilliant light of Jin's willpower. The swords made contact. The two willpowers that symbolized the first and the last of the Runcandles met across time and space. The time had come for a mystery to be revealed. "The transmission is complete," the Guardian said softly after completing his move. The aura spread like a tsunami before the Guardian. The giant Sword King fiercely rushed forward in an effort to tear apart the entire ethereal plane, while Jin remained at the center of it all. Jin stood like a statue after wielding his sword. He had failed. His willpower was vast, but Jin's strength was still not powerful enough to pierce through the giant Sword King. But this wasn't a battle for life, nor a slaughter to establish the obvious power difference between them. It was merely a ritual held to transmit the will. The aura ravaging the ethereal plane began to turn into dark particles. The power that could have torn Jin apart thousands of times now scattered like dandelion seeds in the wind. Jin extended his arm and felt the dark particles, the shadow energy, gently escaping through his fingers. The Guardian, who had been standing far away, also turned into a faint shadow and disappeared. "Sir Sildare?" Jin shouted his name in despair. There were so many things Jin wanted to ask him after the battle. About how the Runcandles of the past were, or why he had been erased from history. But to think that he would disappear so abruptly. The particles of shadow energy roamed like petals in the wind, offering no answers. Instead, they gathered around Jin and swirled around him as if they wanted to do something. Jin could hear faint murmurs coming from far away. The sound came from the whirlpool of shadow energy, and it was something Jin had never heard before while exerting his power. Jin focused and realized that it was actually human speech. "Is it Sir Sildare's voice?" The extremely faint voice murmured these words. "Jin, I'm sorry. I don't think I can leave many records." Jin widened his eyes. "Sodaret?" It was Jin's god's voice, which hadn't spoken to him since the moments before his return to life. It was Sodaret's voice. Jin began to shout Sodaret's name as soon as he recognized the voice. He shouted with all his might, running around through the dark particles, but received no response. "Jin, I'm sorry. I don't think I can leave many records." The same voice repeated. Very soon, Jin realized that the voice came from a very distant past. It was because another voice had joined Sodaret's in the shadow energy. "Who are you talking to, Sodaret? Jin? Isn't Jin the contractor you mentioned before after 1,000 years? Hello, Timar. Murakan and Misha have been complaining that you manifest too often and that lately you've been making them too nervous. The battle against the Zipples will begin soon. I'll be in trouble if either of those two falls ill, you know? Give me a break. Don't talk to them about Jin. Come on. I've already told you I won't. Can't you see? You barely trust me." The conversation was clearly that of Sodaret and Timar from 1,000 years ago. "But you've already chosen the contractor who will come in 1,000 years. Does that mean you think we'll win for sure in the battle against the Zipple? I mean, since you're already planning contractors for 1,000 years from now and all that, There would barely be any run candles left in the world to enter into contracts with you if we ever lost, right? Chapter 288. Fragments of the Past. Sildare 1. To hear the voice of the past. And so clearly, Jean took another look around but only saw a tornado of shadow energy. Jean had lived a total of 47 years between his past life and the present and had seen many mysterious things, but none as shocking as this. To hear voices from 1,000 years ago was quite unreal. Soderette sounded as if he had already foreseen what would happen 1,000 years from that moment. Jean felt confused. It was as if someone had put their hands in his brain and turned them around. He was about to vomit from the nausea. It also didn't seem like a third party was playing a prank on him. Jean had never heard of any spell that could record voices, and even if that were possible, who could imitate Soderette's voice? This can't be a deception or a trap, and certainly I haven't gone mad after the battle. This has to be a message that Soderette left for me. There was no other way to explain this strange phenomenon. A small sound like someone trampling on dry straw resonated in his ears. He stopped hearing the voices when he lost concentration. I must remain calm. Relax. I first need to hear the voices. Jean calmed himself down and refocused on the voices coming from the tornado. He heard the ancient conversation again. In fact, he not only heard their voices. Jean was drawn into the whirlpool of shadow energy and absorbed into a different dimension. Everything was dark and empty when he opened his eyes again. It was another ethereal plane within the ethereal plane. It was incomparably darker than the previous one. The entire area was covered in complete darkness. It was black as coal, and Jean could barely see anything in front of him. But, for some reason, it retained color. This mysterious ethereal plane should obviously feel strange to him, but it mysteriously felt familiar. He had once arrived in a similar place when he first signed a contract with Soderette in his past life. This is quite similar to that day. That was the first time Jean experienced such ethereal planes, but he didn't feel out of place back then. In fact, as the shadow contractor, he instinctively felt safe there. He knew that only those who belonged to the shadows could enter that place from the moment he set foot in it. Now he felt the same. Jean no longer felt confused. There was something different in this plane. The voices from the past were much clearer. Hey, Soderette, why aren't you answering my question? Now you're making me feel uncomfortable. Hey, Soderette, why aren't you answering my question? Hey, Soderette, why aren't you? Timar's voice resonated, and Jean headed towards the source of the sound. He looked around and saw in the distance a large bright orb of gray color. When Jean reached the orb, he observed the unfolding events with his own eyes. He could see Soderette and Timar having this conversation 1,000 years ago. They were talking inside the orb. The surface of the orb was blurry, and he couldn't see everything in detail. However, he could distinguish the shapes of the people and objects inside it. Yet everything was soaked in a dark gray that made it difficult to distinguish colors, like an old and deteriorated painting. Essentially, Jean was catching a glimpse of the world 1,000 years before his time as an observer. The man sitting at the table must be Timar. Yes, he looks exactly like the man I saw in the Great Desert. Soderette manifested in human form, but Jean could only see his back. Jean had never seen him manifest in his past life, so he found it hard to imagine what his face would look like. Jean took a closer look at the gray orb. The scene of the two sitting together felt mysteriously familiar to him, and he soon realized the reason. It's the central hall of the Castle of Storms. I can't believe it looked the same back then. The central hall of the Castle of Storms hardly differed from how it was now. Well, you know, I'm the god of swords and shadows. That means I can't see the future as clearly as AZ Mill. What? Then how did you choose the contractor who will come 1,000 years from now? That and seeing the future are two different things. Let's say I can already name one, like a god. The grand doors of the central hall opened. It was Sildare Runcandle who joined them in the hall. He wore his armor and held his giant sword over his shoulder, dressed the same as in the fight against Jean earlier. Sildare, do you really have to bring such intimidating giant swords inside the house? Sildaray simply ignored Timar's complaint and greeted Sodaret politely. Sildaray Runcandle faced the guardian god of the clan. And yet, he paid no attention to the patriarch's words. Hey Sildaray, so what do you think about it? About what, patriarch? Sodaret tells me he doesn't know whether we would win or lose against the Zipples. He even set a contractor to come 1,000 years later, and yet, he's making excuses, acting as if he can't see what's coming imminently. Patriarch. What? Are you afraid? Timar didn't respond. Instead, he briefly exchanged a glance with Sildaray. I'm just curious to hear Sodaret's opinion. Everyone is counting on you, Patriarch. Don't you realize the enormous impact of every word you speak? Please, don't ask those questions so lightly to the guardian god when there's someone else nearby. Timar shrugged. Well, I guess you're right. But you know what? I'll be honest. I'm anxious. Sildaray, you must feel the same, right? I am not anxious, sir. You're lying more often these days. Even I, as a knight of the divine star, am afraid to fight the Zipples. I'm sure you and the others are much more afraid than I am. The Runcandles are undoubtedly the strongest clan, patriarch. In any case, feeling fear is not a crime, and one should be proud for not fleeing even with fear. I beg to differ, sir. Yes, you would differ, all right. But unfortunately for you, my word happens to be the rule and truth within the Runcandle clan. I have been hearing news that you have been reprimanding any clan member who shows signs of fear lately. You shouldn't do that, you know? Person can feel fear. That's nothing special. Even more so when facing a battle on an unprecedented scale. His words were not formal or strict at all. But Timar's casual and somewhat playful tone still carried undeniable weight. You are sensitive and aggressive towards clan members because you yourself feel fear, don't you? Don't deceive yourself, Sildaray. You must recognize it, accept it, and control it. Carrying that atrocious giant sword with you all the time is another sign of your fear. Understood, sir. Sure. But what has brought you here? Oh, I came to report the unusual activities happening around the Zipple's first magic tower recently, sir. First magic tower. The Tower of Tales, right? Yes, Patriarch. Over 300 dragons gathered abruptly around the first magic tower, so Sarah Runcandle went to investigate with 5 others. With that strength, she wouldn't have much trouble escaping to a safe place even if she's discovered. No, since we're on the subject, maybe I should go and see. I wonder what they're trying to do with 300 dragons. Prepare yourself, Sildaray. Yes, sir. Sodaret, I'll be back in a... The gray orb suddenly twisted. What's happening? Jean wondered. He shivered and inspected the orb. The display continued playing on the distorted orb, but it was so twisted that he could barely make out anything. The voices were also distorted, making it impossible to decipher. It was like a book whose pages had been deliberately torn out. But Jean couldn't do anything about it since he knew nothing about those peculiar forms of recording devices. It was impossible to know if his actions would make things worse. Time seemed slower now. Oh! Jean couldn't help but comment aloud as the gray orb returned to its original state after it displayed a scene from 1,000 years ago. But it was from a different time. The scene was no longer unfolding in the central hall of the Castle of Storms. Nor was it the scene of Timar and Sildaray on their way to support Sarah Runcandle. What Jean could see now was a healing room from 1,000 years ago. A man was sitting next to the bed with his head hanging in defeat. It was Sildaray. It seemed like a long time had passed within the orb after it became distorted. The beard on Sildaray's face showed the passage of time. But Jean had no way of knowing what could have happened between the two scenes shown by the orb. Patriarch, we all had our hopes placed in you and only you. It was Timar who was on the bed. He had no visible wounds, but he was noticeably emaciated and barely breathing. Sildaray couldn't help but sigh loudly and look at the bed and the ceiling as if expressing his resentment. Just because, damn it, Sodaret, you damned traitorous bastard. Is this what you meant by keeping the promise? Come out. Reveal yourself, you damn bastard. Sildaray shouted aloud. A group of knights who had been outside hastily entered the room. They tried to calm Sildaray, but they were no match for his brute strength. Sir Sildaray, please calm down for the sake of the other clan members. We need you to be an example for them. Please, calm down, I beg you. It wasn't the guardian god who did this to the patriarch. Please lower your voice, Sir Sildaray. Who did this to the patriarch then, if not Sodaret? What was that useless god doing when our patriarch was attacked? How dare you blaspheme against the guardian god? Sildaray. A woman entered afterward and held Sildaray by the shoulder. She was one of the 10 knights, just like Sildaray. Blaspheme? Didn't you hear the patriarch's final order? He ordered us not to resent the guardian god and to fulfill the promise we made with him. He emphasized it over and over again, even as his consciousness left him. Then Sildaray's entire body trembled, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Diana, are you telling me that you still believe in Sodaret after seeing the patriarch in this state? Whether I believe in him or not is not important. See? Even you no longer believe in Sodaret. You feel the same way I do, don't you, Diana? I know you do. What I feel is also irrelevant. Sildaray, what truly matters is that this was the order given by the patriarch. The patriarch's word is absolute. We were the ones who established the laws of the Runcandle clan. If you continue in this state, I won't let it slide, even if it's you. Accept the patriarch's order. It is the only duty and the only hope we have left. Diana waved her hand, and all the knights, except Sildaray, left the room. She gave a long hug to the immensely strong man who cried like a little child. The gray orb distorted again. But unlike the previous time, it didn't seem like it would return from its unstable and distorted state. The shadow energy forming the gray orb dispersed into particles. In fact, the ethereal plane itself was dissolving into particles of shadow energy. It took only a blink of an eye. Jean was torn from the double layers of ethereal planes and found himself standing in the middle of Valai, in the Great Plains of Ans. This was the same place where he had activated the key with Mirakan. He took a deep breath and tried to clear his mind. Then he saw 2 unfamiliar objects before him. One was a black bead made of shadow energy, and the other was a fragment of Sildaray Runcandle's giant sword from 1,000 years ago. Chapter 289. Fragments of the Past. Sildaray, 2. Jean tried to pick up the black bead and the fragment of the giant sword but ended up coughing up blood instead. He was in shock. It was all due to the extreme tension. Undoubtedly, the Reign of the King of Legends was an excessive technique that had to be used before completing its 3 phases: initiation, progression, and conclusion. Chills and pain ran through his spine and spread throughout his body. It was as if furious flames were erupting from his injured organs, and his fractured bones were screaming. Jean sat in a meditation position and controlled the forces within his body. He calmed the aura that was about to go against the flow and deposited a minimal amount of lightning energy into his empty, illuminated heart. Phew! The pain slowly subsided. He now felt capable of walking and running. He wasn't sure if he would be able to bring his body to its optimal condition before the Black Knight's assassination began, and he started to worry about it. But it was a small price to pay for everything he had gained by coming to the tomb. He met and fought against a progenitor of the Black Knights, experienced a final move lost in time, and caught a glimpse of the untold stories from 1,000 years ago. Those stories spoke of a manifested Sodaret and those who were the ancestors and roots of the Runcandle clan. No matter what happens there, don't panic. This is what Sodaret wanted me to tell you. Pekan Minche wasn't exaggerating when giving this advice along with the location of the tomb. The things Jean experienced in Valai and inside Timar's first tomb were, in a way, more shocking than his own rebirth. Sodaret chose me as his contractor 1,000 years ago, although I already suspected it to some extent. The contractor of 1,000 years. A contractor already decided 1,000 years ago. It reminded him of the day he met Mirakan in the Castle of Storms. Look, Sodaret, is this a joke? This is wrong. Say something. How could the promised contractor who was supposed to come in 1,000 years be nothing more than this pitiful child? I am Mirakan, the emissary of Sodaret, his friend, and the last descendant of the first being shaped from the shadows. In fulfillment of The pact made 1,000 years ago. I will be with you from now on. Speak your name. Murakan wasn't the only one who mentioned something about Jean as the contractor of 1,000 years. Clam, the mana god, had also mentioned something similar to Jean, and the same went for Misha. But Murakan, Misha, and Clam only knew that he was a contractor named 1,000 years ago. They didn't seem to know that Sodaret had named him by his name at that time. Sodaret had asked Timar not to mention Jin's name to Murakan and Misha in the untold story he observed in the ethereal plane. But why? Jin had been named 1,000 years before his arrival, and everyone who had a deep connection with Sodaret already knew it. Timar had already heard his name from Sodaret's mouth. And it seemed the same went for Sir Sildare. Why didn't Sodaret tell my name to the guardian dragons and Clam? Jean couldn't see the reason. Not even the untold story revealed by the gray orb showed any hint. If Sodaret could prepare these things 1,000 years in advance, there must be a reason for hiding my name. It wasn't just 1,000 years. Sodaret had made preparations in the legends that faded 5,000 years ago and in Clam, the forgotten god whose time was closer to the beginning of the universe. All of this just for Jean. Even the simplest calculations indicated that Sodaret's preparations for him had started long before the beginning of the human race itself. There must be a reason for it, although it's not something he can figure out at the moment. It was likely that Sodaret had left other clues and messages in other places as well. He could always find out why Sodaret had concealed his name once he reached the other clues. There were other questions occupying Jin's mind and confusing him at the moment. Sodaret named me his contractor 1,000 years ago, but in my past life, he didn't reveal any hint about it when I signed a contract with him. Contractor, it seems you sparked envy in someone's heart when you were little. You've been unable to tap into your potential all this time due to a trivial curse. But perhaps it was precisely because of that that I was drawn to you. Now you will become an unparalleled sorcerer, contractor. I will enjoy watching you. The fact that he already knew and had named Jean before their encounter contradicted what he said back then. In fact, Sodaret went on to reveal to me that he was a god of the sword and shadows, unlike what was known about him in the world. But he didn't tell me why he abandoned Run Kandasht. Suddenly, Jin's heart started beating faster. He remembered the second untold story he saw in the ethereal plane. Timar was slowly agonizing in his bed, and Sildare was furious, calling Sodaret a traitor. Traitor. It was true that Sodaret had never sided with the Run Candles after Timar. He often signed contracts with magicians, mostly Zipples, which led people to believe he was a god of the Zipples. If he had betrayed the Run Candles, what was it for? If he didn't betray us, why did Sodaret abandon the Run Candle for 1,000 years? To the point of becoming a god of our sworn enemy. Actions were always based on objectives. That must hold true for both gods and humans. The fact that Sodaret left the Run Candles, and then returned, chose Jean out of all people, and all the other actions that were difficult to comprehend. They had to be necessary choices made toward a specific end. It was very likely that Sodaret's divine powers were what brought him back to life upon birth. What did he want to gain from it? Jean had long stopped asking himself this question, especially since he deemed it irrelevant. Regardless of the unknown purpose for which Sodaret brought him back to life, Jean decided to follow his own desires and will. As a result, he naturally began to yearn for the throne of the Run Candles and the downfall of the Zipples. The desire to surpass his father and become the greatest martial artist in the world ignited within him. He never doubted for a second that he could make that future a reality. At least until today, when he caught a glimpse of the ancient tales of the Run Candles in Timar's first tomb. The untold story I witnessed in the ethereal plane showed that even Timar himself feared the power of the Zipples. I don't know if Timar lay in bed before or after the war, but what I do know is that he ultimately lost. Not even the Divine Star Knight, who led the greatest swordsman clan in history, could break down the walls of the Zippel clan. The Tower of Tales, where it was said that 300 dragons had gathered, still stood to this day. In comparison, several parts of the Run Candles' history were erased, and they even lost their powers as swordsmen. The power difference between the two clans was greater now than in the time of Timar's defeat. The fact that Sir Sildaray mentioned betrayal also bothers me. Timar seemed to have trusted Sodaret until the end. But was his trust rewarded? Timar had no place in the Runcandle crypts, and not a single history book in the world spared a line for Sildaray. So far, it was safe to say that they hadn't been rewarded for their faith. There were too many questionable elements about Sodaret. All right, that's enough. Jean halted his train of thought as if he were cutting it with a sword. He felt that the endless anxiety and baseless suspicions would lead nowhere. At least from what he had seen through the gray orb, there was no clear evidence of Sodaret's betrayal. And the two stories were connected in a very unnatural way, like a book missing crucial pages. The recording device that Sodaret had left in the ethereal plane was somewhat damaged. The way it played distorted landscapes and speeches seemed certainly irregular. In the distorted landscape, there might be decisive evidence about the situation of that era. Even if Sodaret had truly betrayed the Runcandles, and even if that remained true to this day, there's no reason to be disappointed in him. Timar's defeat is not my defeat. If the Runcandles of that time were stronger than the Runcandles of today, I just have to make the clan surpass their strength after becoming their patriarch. Sodaret, Timar, and the Runcandles of that time. Regardless of what had transpired between them, Jean decided to uphold the values he had set for himself, just as he had done until now. This would be his guiding principle, regardless of the secrets of Sodaret and the Runcandles that Jean would discover in the future. He heard the rustling of grass behind him. Jean turned around and saw Murakan running towards him. His brows furrowed horribly and injuries covering his body. "Hey, kid, are you all right?" "Ah yes, I almost forgot about you. Where have you been all this time, Murakan? I wanted to find you right away, but I forgot because I was lost in my thoughts." "You forgot about me? The great Murakan? Well boy, Sildaray must have really knocked some sense out of you. I didn't expect to hear such bothersome nonsense from you. You won't feel so bothered once you hear what I saw there. You'll have to agree with me." "What was it?" "I was sucked into another layer of the ethereal plane after the fight with Sir Sildaray ended. There, I saw some people from 1,000 years ago, through a recording device that Sodaret left there." "A recording device?" Jean explained the content of the device. Took him some time. He described the conversation between Sodaret and Timar, Sildaray's fury, and Diana's consolation. But Jean omitted the part where Sodaret had known Jin's name all along. It wasn't for any particular reason, except for the fact that as Sodaret's contractor, Jean had no reason to go against the will of his god at the moment. Murakan was completely surprised at first, but soon he listened attentively to Jin's description as he walked down the path of memories. Everything Jean recounted seemed to correspond to memories that he cherished, whether good or bad. But wait a minute, Sildaray, that guy, he must have hit his head or something. It was already quite ridiculous when he called me a useless soulless, but how dare he call Sodaret a traitor? Well, if only I could kill the dead once again. He showed me an amazing secret move. I was tempted to learn it. He was quite an impressive guy, at least in terms of his strength as a knight, although I have no idea why he turned out to be such an idiot. In any case, this is left behind after Sodaret's ethereal plane shattered, right? Murakan pointed to the black beads and the fragment of the giant sword on the ground. Yes, it was supposed to be the ingredients for reinforcing Bradamanti, so I guess this is it. I think it only applies to the fragment of the giant sword. I haven't seen this black bead before either, but it's not something that belongs to a blacksmith. I'm sure of it. Really? How can you be so sure if it's the first time you've seen such an object? I'm sure you also perceive that the bead is filled with shadow energy. It has the shape of a seal, much like the mirror we obtained in Colin. It's supposed to be an object made for the purpose of hiding or suppressing something. I better show this to Misha. The mere mention of Misha made Murakan frown. Jean chuckled at seeing it and summoned Shuri. Let's head back for now, Murakan. Chapter 290. Power and Reverence for Power 1. The Volta mansion was under repair. Workers were scattered everywhere around the once dilapidated mansion, which seemed like a strong wind could bring it down entirely. The landlord and members of his clan couldn't help but shed tears from time to time, overwhelmed with emotion that such a dream had become a reality. Even some of the former residents who had left the area due to famine were starting to return home. Finblanche, the Volta clan's butler, helped in distributing food to the servants during the day and devised budget plans to utilize the Runcandle relief funds with the Lord at night. Petro had followed Jin's orders to provide ample support without going overboard. But even that was more than enough to uplift this small territory and allow it to plan for the future. Therefore, Finblanche was content. In truth, he had never been as happy in his life as he was now. All of this is thanks to you, Sir Jean. I have never seen the people of this land so happy and joyful ever since I became the Volta clan's butler. Finn brought out a freshly brewed cup of tea and smiled. Once the repair of the Volta mansion is complete, the workers from Tychon will build a new house for you. They will construct a soundproof forge in its basement. If there's anything you want to add to the house, let me know. Oh no, Sir Jean, I couldn't ask for anything. I am already grateful enough to have a separate house for myself. Thank you, sir. No, I should be the one thanking you. Jean drank the tea, but Murakan frowned, annoyed. In fact, he had been irritated throughout the entire hour they had spent at Finn's house. Hey, Pecan Minche, show yourself already, that mustache demon. How long are you going to make me wait? Pecan hadn't shown up yet. Moreover, Murakan was furious because Pecan hadn't warned Jean of all the dangers in Timar's first tomb during their initial encounter. About that, I'm sorry, Lord Murakan. I may be your contractor, but I don't have the power to summon him at will. Worried, Finn spoke and scratched his head. Pecan only appeared 3 hours later. Murakan's patience was wearing thin. Finn's eyes rolled back, and his body started to tremble. Was the sign of a manifestation. You work. Soon, they heard Pecan's voice as the whites of his eyes began to emit light. Oh well, you never stop chattering, do you? Greetings to you, Pecan. Oh hi, how was the journey, Jean Runcandle? By the way, Murakan, you're as slow as ever, aren't you? Don't tell me you didn't realize I was trying to avoid having to talk to you. What? You were avoiding me? Why? Pecan then widened his eyes and glared at Murakan. Have you forgotten how much you annoyed me when I worked with Balisada and Bradamanti? You would come to me every day to insist on their completion and mock me, saying that my mustache would grow faster than the speed at which I built the sword. What are you talking about? When did I say those things? Murakan made a face as if he couldn't remember. Well, don't you remember? You probably don't even remember how many times Quicantle and Timar had to come to me behind your back to apologize on your behalf. You have no idea how many times I considered abandoning Balisada and Bradamanti because of you. Pecan barked. Jean clicked his tongue. At Murakan. Seems like it was your fault. That's not all. The whole time you stayed in my forge and voiced your complaints, you would grab and hit any dragon that crossed the skies of my city. Do you know how terrified the other blacksmiths were? They all came to complain about you. What? What's all this about? Your forge was in a backward village in the south of Vilmer Kingdom. That place is too far from Stormcastle, and it wasn't even my territory. Why would I hit the dragons passing through that area? Where I am is my territory. Wasn't that what you used to say all the time? It suddenly reminded Jean of what Murakan said about the waters of Vermont when they were heading to meet Quicantle. Anyone who entered my territory was defeated before any questions. That's how things worked back then. In reality, Murakan had an incomparably unpleasant personality in his prime. He was boastful, arrogant, and insolent to the extreme, but he was also fierce and powerful beyond description. That's how everyone remembered Murakan in his prime. He was so infamous that even Latrie, who had never known Murakan back then, feared him based on the stories alone. It was no secret that most dragons had a bad temper. But at that time, Murakan was certainly a level above the majority. Pecan was fuming with anger. Thinking about all the things Murakan had done in the past infuriated him. You had such a bad reputation that bards used to make songs about how the village of blacksmiths in Vilmer Kingdom was filled with the screams of dragons every day. A strange rumor started spreading. and people even criticized me for being a power-hungry blacksmith who relied on the power of Timar and you. Murakin could only blink confusedly for some time. About that, Pekan, if I truly was like that, then I apologize. I'm sorry. Pekan trembled and met Murakin's eyes. But he was thinking, apologizing? Is that something Murakin is really capable of saying? Really? What did you just? Murakin interrupted. I said I'm sorry. To be honest, the only thing I remember from everything you said was teasing you about the mustache. But given the things I used to do back then, I guess they're all plausible. Are you really Murakin? Really? I think something happened to my memory during my 1,000-year slumber. I also lost much of my powers, as you can probably see. In any case, if I have offended you, I apologize for it. Murakin was about to bow his head. Jean was taken aback and immediately grabbed him by the shoulder. Pekan was completely dumbfounded but also held onto Murakin's shoulder. No need. Come on, Murakin. We were so close, you know? I was just complaining because I was annoyed. Now you're making me feel bad. Now, Pekan seemed more remorseful than Murakin. Pekan Minche? Yes. Was I an evil dragon 1,000 years ago? That was the core of Murakin's pride. Although he was the most powerful and arrogant dragon, he prided himself on never having done anything to be classified as an evil dragon. No, you weren't an evil dragon. You never harmed humans and you used to play with the children of the village. Oh, and do you remember? Ellie, when that girl was kidnapped by the Zippels, you rescued her. Oh, damn it. Why am I justifying your character? I met Sildare in the tomb, and he insulted me, calling me heartless. I thought that idiot had gone crazy, but seeing your reaction, maybe I was the one with issues. All the memories I have of Sildare, or of you, are good ones since you were all people of Timar. Jean had never seen Murakin act like this. As for Murakin, he truly didn't remember. Part of his memory that led him into slumber was blurry, and he was aware of this fact. However, he didn't believe that the fuzzy parts of his memory were important since he would have remembered them if they were. But all the people he recently met who knew about his past or spoke like them, such as the Kinslow leader, Sildare, and Pekan, gave him the impression that something had gone wrong. Look, Murakin, you're not an evil dragon. It's true that you pressed and rushed me back then, but you had good reasons for it. You needed Timar's sword to be completed to fight against the Zippels. Pekan shrugged and continued. And it's also true that you regularly beat up dragons. But the intrusion into their territory gave enough reasons for it, and in fact it was necessary for security reasons since I was forging Timar's weapon at the time. Back then, 90% of all dragons in the world belonged to the Zippels. Murakin lifted his head. Everyone knew that you made many sacrifices for the Runcandle and Huffister clans. I complained because I was glad to see you. Don't make me feel bad now. Yes, I knew something was wrong. Both you and Sildare have no reason to hate me, but you confused me by saying those things. Sildare didn't say anything to you, right? He called me heartless. Can you even imagine that? That courteous guy did. I haven't seen Sildare since I created the giant sword tamer for him. He probably complained like I did. Sildare went further and even called Sodaret a traitor. Apparently, the boy saw him say it in the past through a recording device made with shadow energy. Jean described the recording device for a while. Pekan's eyes widened in surprise. I didn't know such devices were there. The only thing Sodaret told me was that there would be a guardian formed from Sildare's will. That's why I wanted to reinforce Bradamanti with a fragment of Tamer, the giant sword from that place. Just as Murakin thought, the shadow energy account was not an object for forging. Pekan took a good look at the account and confirmed once again that Sodaret hadn't mentioned anything like that. Above all, I can't comprehend why Sildare would call Sodaret a traitor. Didn't that guy respect Sodaret more than any other knight of the 10? He was also extremely courteous to you. Pekan, were you alive after I fell asleep? I lived for about 3 years after that. Or was it 5 years? Did Sodaret do anything against the Runcandles during that time? Or something of the sort, although Quicantle and Misha didn't tell me anything about it. Oh, it seems you also met Quicantle. I'm glad to know she's still alive. But no, not that I know of. You all know this. But the Runcandles made a pact after losing to the Zipples. If you and Timar had led the battle unharmed. Pecan paused and observed Murakan's reaction. He was well aware that what had happened back then was a great scar and humiliation for both of them, and for the Runcandle clan. Forgive my mistake. I'm sorry, Murakan. First, you accused me of being evil, and now you apologize. Mustache, maybe you became a god, but you still lack class. Anyway, I think we'll have to find the rest of Soderet's recording devices if we want to figure out why Sildare said that. Pecan, do you have any more keys from Soderet? Jean asked. Pecan shook his head. That was all I had. But I know who has the key to the second tomb. Additionally, there will also be a guardian in the second tomb, and an ingredient to reinforce Bradamanti. Who has the key? The key to the second tomb was held by the most surprising figure of all. Almango, the god of clams.